camera glides low across a fog-drenched trail at dawn. On one side, golden light flickers through crumbling adobe walls, the rust-stained bell of Mission San Miguel still swaying. On the other, frost clings to red brick as whispers seem to rise from Boston's granary burying ground. Two coastlines, two histories, one question: who still cries? Locals near the old mission say they've heard it. A woman weeping near the old chapels at night, her sobs rising with the scent of eucalyptus. Meanwhile, in Boston, a different wail has been reported for over a century. Sharp, urgent, like a scream caught in time. Two haunted landscapes, one rooted in Spanish conquest, the other in revolutionary defiance, and both somehow echoing the same sound: grief. But whose grief are we hearing? Let's rewind. California, 1769. Spanish friars arrive, bearing crucifixes and dreams of divine conquest. They build missions, 21 in total, stretching from San Diego to Sonoma. Each mission was more than a church. It was a tool of colonization. Native peoples were baptized, renamed, stripped of their languages and rituals. The missions brought agriculture, architecture, and annihilation. Father Junipero Serra, now sainted by the Vatican, was both architect and executioner. Indigenous records speak of starvation, disease, and floggings. By 1834, when the missions were secularized, tens of thousands of native souls had passed through or been buried beneath their walls. Now, picture Boston. It's 1770. Snow and revolution thicken the air. British soldiers stand guard on King Street. That night, 5 colonists fall under musket fire. The Boston Massacre. It's the spark. Within 5 years, war engulfs the colonies. The spirit of rebellion spreads like wildfire, led by men like Samuel Adams, Paul Revere, and a voice that still haunts Boston: Crispus Attucks, the first to die. Boston's cemeteries are older than the Republic. Revolutionary bones rest under centuries of moss. The soil remembers, and sometimes it speaks. The development of the mystery, strange events, eyewitnesses, and lingering questions. Santa Barbara Mission, 1992. A college student named Elena Garcia records a cassette diary for a cultural anthropology class. On October 13th, her voice trembles. Last night I stayed late. There was no one else on the grounds. I heard it again. A woman crying. She says my name. But the voice, it's older than the earth. Her tape was found. She was never seen again. Flash to Boston, 2003. A night janitor at the old State House, Michael Reynolds, reports a chilling encounter. At 3:03 a.m., while cleaning the upstairs rotunda, he hears stomping boots and shouts, "No taxation!" echoing from below. But no one is there. The building is locked. His supervisor finds him 2 hours later, huddled in the basement, sobbing. He never worked again. Then there's the case of the Smith twins. In 2018, the California siblings visited Mission San Juan Capistrano. A tourist photo captures something eerie. Behind them, a shadowy figure in mission garb, face twisted in grief. Local legend calls her the Penitent, a sorrowful spirit said to have been a Spanish nun who turned against the friars after witnessing their cruelty to native children. She was buried alive in the garden, or so the whispers go. In Boston, a similar figure haunts the Freedom Trail, the Screamer, as locals call her. Described as wearing a colonial cloak and bonnet, she's been seen near Faneuil Hall and the granary burying ground, always crying, always watching. Some say she's the widow of a traitor. Others believe she's the spirit of liberty itself, mourning the price of freedom. Present-day connection, the legend still breathes in pop culture. It doesn't stop there. These tales didn't vanish with time. They evolved. Netflix's Ghosts of the Missions dramatized Elena Garcia's last days, blending documentary with found footage. The final episode, a black screen, just audio, a woman crying. Millions streamed it. But some viewers claim to hear their names whispered during the weeping. Meanwhile, in Boston, the indie horror hit Revere's Curse followed a modern-day tour guide haunted by a screaming ghost. Critics dismissed it as folklore fluff, until lead actress Haley Young began hearing cries off-camera during filming and quit acting entirely. And tourism? California's missions have seen a surge in dark pilgrimage tours, where visitors light candles for the unnamed dead. In Boston, Midnight Freedom Trail walks now include stops where screams were reportedly recorded by EVP, electronic voice phenomena investigators. One clip, captured in 2020, became a viral TikTok trend. Users layered the scream over footage of fireworks and protests, with captions like, "The past never left." Even fashion absorbed it. LA brand Penance released a clothing line inspired by the weeping nun. Veiled hoodies, rosary beads, embroidered shadows. In Boston, street artists stenciled the screamer's silhouette in blood red across alleyways paired with the word, "Remember." These aren't just ghost stories. They're living artifacts, the spirits of oppression and revolution, mourning their unresolved legacies in our time. 2 cities, 2 centuries, one lingering sound. A woman crying on the West Coast, another screaming on the East. What binds them? Is it pain, guilt, the inescapable echo of history's unburied truths? Or is it something older than both missions and musket fire? Next, we travel deeper into the architecture of the unexplained. From hidden tunnels beneath Mission Dolores to secret Masonic carvings in Boston churches, Block 2 will peel back the layers both cities tried to bury. But before we go further, let me ask you, did this story shake something in you? Have you heard the cries yourself? On a dusty trail or a cold cobblestone street? Tell us in the comments. Share your own encounters or family legends. And if you want to keep walking this haunted road with us, hit that subscribe, not just to follow us, but to become part of this journey through forgotten legends and cultural echoes. There are records that don't appear in books, stories whispered by old guides, scribbled in forgotten letters, buried under modern concrete. In this section, we'll open the guts of cities. Beneath the bells and historic lanterns, there are passages that time has tried to swallow. Tunnels, crypts, hidden corridors that connect the visible to the inexplicable. And within them, the echo of weeping never stops. Let's start in San Francisco, in the heart of Mission Dolores. Founded in 1776, this mission is the oldest in California still standing, and also one of the most haunted, according to locals. But what few know is that beneath its foundations lie primitive, hand-excavated catacombs, where it is said that indigenous people were unceremoniously buried. In 1907, during excavations for structural reinforcement after the earthquake, workers reported finding bodies piled high, wrapped in worn cloaks, their mouths open as if screaming. The bodies were quickly covered, and the entrance sealed with cement. Since then, the mission's main altar seems to tremble subtly during certain nighttime masses. Priests attribute this to natural ground movements, but the faithful swear they feel a presence that watches but never prays. At the opposite end of the country, King's Chapel Crypt in Boston holds colder secrets. This Anglican chapel, built in 1688, rests over a crypt where more than 2,100 bodies were buried. But not all names are recorded. In 1849, after an underground flood, morticians discovered a false wall at the north end of the crypt. Behind it lay 3 unmarked coffins with strange symbols carved into the metal. One of them had a handle carved with the word Salem. Witnesses at the time described an unbearable stench and an oppressive sense of anguish. The coffins were left there. To this day, night guides report that the temperature drops sharply near that wall, even in the height of summer. But it's the tunnels that connect the stories. Tunnels of ambiguous purpose, sometimes used for escape, trafficking, or rituals. In Santa Barbara, independent scholars mapped an underground corridor that runs from the mission to an old Spanish hacienda, now a school. The access was discovered in 1985 by chance when a student fell into a crevice during an outdoor class. She reported seeing crosses burned into the walls and footsteps echoing with no one around. The tunnel was concreted the following month. In Boston, beneath the former Bell in Hand Tavern, amateur archaeologists in 2001 discovered the entrance to a stone tunnel that spiraled downward. Cell phone footage shows what appears to be a rudimentary altar with unlit candles, Masonic symbols, and a Latin inscription, Pro Libertate, Pro Anima. Historians suggest it was used by revolutionaries for secret meetings. But there is another, more disturbing theory. Some claim the site also served a hidden cult dedicated to the spirits of sacrifice, a belief popular among sailors and libertines in the 18th century. The video ends abruptly with a sharp noise and a shaky image of a hooded figure. No explanation was given. Both tunnels, though separated by continents and purposes, share something undeniable: the uneasy silence they carry. Not the natural silence of abandonment, but the kind that weighs heavily, that represses, that seems to scream from within. Those who have dared to descend swear that the most common sound is not the wind, nor the rats. It is crying. Always crying. Contemporary records reinforce this. In 2015, during a restoration at Mission San Luis Obispo, workers reported hearing laughter and moans coming from the floor. One of them, Arturo Reyes, recorded on his cell phone the sound of a voice repeating, "Déjame ir," let me go, in archaic Spanish. The recording was analyzed by audio technicians and remained inconclusive. Reyes quit his job days later and never spoke about the matter again. That same year, in Boston, history student Amanda Liu was writing a thesis on colonial protests. During a guided tour of the crypt of King's Chapel, she suddenly fell into a trance after leaning against one of the columns. Her classmates claim she began muttering phrases in Old English, some similar to recorded speeches by Thomas Paine. When she came to, Amanda claimed to have seen an endless corridor of red lights and a faceless woman saying, "They don't know yet." Amanda changed her major weeks later. Her thesis remained unfinished. But why do these places whisper, scream, or cry? Some psychogeographic scholars suggest that the architecture of these buildings, aligned with electromagnetic intersection points, can amplify emotional resonances from the past. Others speak of collective trauma solidified in matter, a theory in which materials absorb human suffering to the point of manifesting it repeatedly, like a tape that never stops playing. There are also the more mystical, who claim that tunnels and crypts are actually spiritual conduits, channels where time bends, allowing voices from different centuries to coexist, converse, or even attempt to escape. Pop culture has recently begun to explore this idea. The Synergy Plus series Underground recreated passages inspired by the Boston and Missions tunnels in an interactive horror game. In one of the levels, the player hears a voice saying, "They're in the walls." This seemingly contextless phrase appeared in 18 different online forums, with players claiming they heard the same thing at the same point, even after deleting the game. In Los Angeles, the independent film Dolores Obscura, funded by a crowdfunding campaign, follows an archaeologist investigating a newly discovered tunnel beneath the Santa Ynez mission. The film ends with the protagonist locked in a crypt, muttering in an extinct language, tears streaming down her face. In Boston, the podcast Freedom Whispers produced a dramatized documentary series where each episode explores an urban legend based on the colonial tunnels. The most popular episode, The Screamer's Echo, included an interview with a former night watchman at the public library who described seeing, night after night, a female figure pass through walls and disappear beneath the floor. He was never able to figure out where she went. Tourism has also adapted. In San Diego, companies offer overnight packages called Paths of the Penitents, where visitors descend into restored passageways of the old missions while listening to audio reports from voices supposedly recorded at the site. Organizers hand out wooden rosaries to each participant. Many are left behind, hanging from rafters, as if the visitors sensed something below has not been forgiven. In Boston, the Red Path Tour takes curious visitors to unofficial crypts beneath the city, with guides dressed as colonial soldiers and lighting provided only by oil lamps. At the end, there's always a pause in the deepest unmarked tomb. A collective silence prevails. On certain nights, they say, the silence is broken by laughter. A sad, hoarse laugh, too distant to be human. It's not just ghosts that reside in these spaces. They are fragments of the past that refuse to be reduced to books. Cries that are not simple hauntings. They are ancestral laments, possibly our own, echoing to remind us that even with all the buildings, tunnels, and cities built, there are still buried screams that no one has dared to fully hear. But what if we listen more closely? What if the next tunnel leads us not to a forgotten past, but to an uncomfortable revelation about who we were, and still are? We'll follow the trail of lost diaries, censored letters, and misplaced documents that indicate an even deeper link between the cries of the missions and the laments of the colonial crypts. There's a woman, mentioned on both sides of the country, who seems to traverse time and space, and her story may hold the key. The record should never have met. A letter filed in a wooden box in the Carmel Missionary Library, dated 1811. A diary hidden inside a chair cover in the Otis Mansion in Boston, discovered by restorers in 1978. Two documents, separated by nearly 3,000 miles and 6 decades, speak of the same woman. No name, only descriptions. Pale skin, dark veil, eyes that seem made of wet glass. In both texts, she appears during moments of crisis, famine, plague, revolt, and in each case, she weeps. In the letter from California, a friar named Domingos records that, for 3 consecutive nights, a female figure appeared in the mission garden after the last prayer had been rang. She didn't respond to calls, didn't react to light, just remained motionless, facing the sea, her shoulders trembling. The friar, who would later mysteriously disappear, ends his letter with a disturbing sentence. "I don't believe she's alive, but neither can I call her dead. She's somewhere between." In his New England diary, a Revolutionary-era clerk named Jonathan Bell reports seeing an unknown woman on the banks of the Charles River in 1775. He describes her as dressed in an old mourning dress, but perfectly clean, as if she had just come from a funeral that had not yet taken place. The strangest thing, he said, was the sound. The crying came not from the woman's throat, but from the earth beneath her feet. He wrote, "Where she treads, the ground groans." The next morning, Bell was found with his face covered in a thick black substance. He survived, but never wrote again. In the archives of the National Institute for Paranormal Studies, there is a cross-section of recorded sightings that suggest a recurring presence in emotionally charged events. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the 1903 Iroquois Theater fire in Chicago, the 1890 Wounded Knee massacre in South Dakota. In at least 2 of these cases, eyewitnesses reported seeing a woman in black, standing as if weeping for everyone. This figure, nameless without a past, became informally referred to as the Mourner. But what truly connects the Enlutada to the California missions and the Boston crypts is a set of letters recently deciphered by linguists at the University of Berkeley. Discovered inside a sacred image at Mission San Fernando, the letters are signed by a woman named Isadora and date from 1790 to 1795. They chronicle the life of a forcibly baptized indigenous woman who became a priest's assistant and was said to have witnessed a secret pact between mission members and Spanish authorities, an agreement to silence a fever outbreak that killed dozens of Native Americans after experiments with unknown herbs brought from the Philippines. Isadora claims to have fled to the north, where she was welcomed by a French colony in exile, and from there, she crossed the country in silence, carrying with her the names of the dead that no one wanted to remember. She ends her final letter with a prophecy: "As long as they remember me, I will not rest. My cry is everyone's." Interestingly, in Boston, contemporary records tell of a foreign woman who arrived during the harsh winter of 1796, seeking shelter in churches and offering prayers in languages no one understood. Some residents nicknamed her the Moor, not because of her ethnic origin, but because of her insistence on wearing a veil, even in the snow. A priest at Holy Trinity Church wrote in his diary, "She looks at us as if she sees beyond our skin, and when she prays, the air around her grows heavy, as if heaven listens and weeps with her." There's something about this woman's story that transcends the body. Her presence seems like a synthesis of rejected memories, inherited pain, a sum total of the tears history has tried to erase. And she doesn't just appear in forgotten documents. She keeps emerging. In 2008, a film crew was filming a documentary about indigenous resistance near the Santa Cruz mission. In one of the takes, they captured a figure in the background, static, covered, partially in shadow. At first, they thought it was an actress accidentally in the frame, but no one recognized the silhouette. When they enlarged the image, they saw that the figure's eyes were looking directly at the camera, despite her head being slightly tilted. The image didn't make the final cut. The producer, however, became obsessed. She began researching, connecting the dots, and writing an article about the woman between backs. Days later, she abandoned the project and disappeared from public view. Her website was taken down. Her last post read, "If she cries, it's because she saw what we don't want to see." In Boston that same year, a historian named Elaine MacArthur organized an exhibition on women in mourning in the Revolution. During the installation, one of the curators claimed to have seen a visitor crying in front of the portrait of Margaret Gage, the wife of a British officer. As she approached, she noticed that the woman was wearing anachronistic clothing and holding a veil. When she tried to approach her, the figure vanished into mist. The incident was kept secret until security footage showed the same woman entering and leaving the room, but in slow motion, without sound, without shadow. Why does she still appear? And what does she carry that time has not been able to dissolve? Some theorists propose that the mourner is not a person, but a collective manifestation, an entity formed by repressed pain, unheard lament, and interrupted stories, like a cultural echo that takes shape when memory insists on returning. In this sense, each generation that refuses to face its past nourishes its presence. It grows with forgetting. It flourishes in denial. This idea gained traction after a symbolic analysis conducted by scholars of comparative mythology. They noted that indigenous cultures of the American Southwest already spoke of a similar figure, a woman who appears in shamans' dreams, bearing the names of lost ancestors. They call her Tukash, the one who walks among the fires. Among the Wampanoag of New England, there is the myth of Shatama, the faceless weeper who appears before the arrival of great changes, carrying a handkerchief stained with ancient blood. The mourner, then, would be the intersection of these archetypes, a messenger between worlds, between omitted truths and documented ghosts. And by all indications, she influences more than just legends. She infiltrates culture, the popular unconscious. In the film, the character of a grieving Mary in the historical drama Ashes of Liberty was directly inspired by accounts of the Boston figure. The director stated in interviews that he dreamed of the character months before writing the script, and that in his dream she said, "I am not a legend, I am a warning." In California, performance artist Mateo Losa staged the play Silence of Sand in 2019, in which a speechless woman walks across the stage crying while letters are read in the background. Losa stated that the work was inspired by an apparition he experienced during a visit to Mission San Juan Bautista. He said he felt a lament inside my chest, which wasn't mine. Even fashion has captured this presence. In 2021, designer Angelica Montoya launched the Enlutadas collection, featuring dark dresses, long veils, and aged fabric gloves. During the presentation, models walked a runway set on earth and stone. The ambient sound was composed of audio recordings of weeping collected from missions, churches, and crypts, electronically processed into a melancholic melody. The show went viral with the caption, "She is still among us." This woman, or this specter, is studied today by psychoanalysts, mystics, historians, and filmmakers. Each group tries to assign meaning to fit into their own vocabulary what perhaps never had a name. But the question that echoes is always the same. If she weeps, for whom does she weep? For herself? For those who have been forgotten? Or for all of us, who continue to walk on the bones of stories poorly told? Let's explore the parallels between forgotten spiritual practices and the rebirth of these figures in the urban imagination. Cleansing rituals performed by Latino communities in the California deserts and silent ceremonies performed by descendants of patriots in the heart of Boston. Because perhaps instead of fearing her, we need to finally listen to what the mourner is trying to tell us. Somewhere between the sacred and the forgotten, practices persist that haven't died. They've merely gone into hiding. On the fringes of masses and patriotic parades, small circles of silence continue to hold their own services, not to invoke something new, but to appease what has never been resolved. In California, descendants of indigenous and Mexican communities hold spiritual cleansing ceremonies around missions. In Boston, families have, for generations, kept candles lit in basements and attics, offering prayers to voices that have never ceased. In the Anza Borrego Desert, a circle of women known as Las Llorantes gathers every early winter at the first starfall. They wear white robes stained with earth and walk in silence to the ruins of a former Jesuit ranch, now in ruins. There they trace symbols with salt and dried rosemary, and burn letters with handwritten names. These names, they say, are those who did not receive a dignified burial. No one outside the group knows where these names come from. One of the participants, named Clara Menchaca, said in an interview, "The woman who cries brings us these names. We dream of her. She doesn't want revenge. She wants remembrance." Meanwhile, in an old Boston neighborhood where colonial buildings stand amid skyscrapers, A Portuguese family named Ramos maintains a custom they say began in 1832. Every last Friday of the month, the eldest member of the family lights 7 black candles in a dark room. In the center is a dish of water and a piece of cloth. When the flame of the 3rd candle flickers, it signals her arrival, the mourner. They don't call her that, but rather the lady. They say she stays for a few minutes, observes, and then leaves. Not a word is spoken. But the next day, strange dreams take over the house. Voices that instruct, shadows that indicate places from the past, children who cry without knowing why. These rituals aren't written in books. They're passed down through whispers, gestures, and fear, but they all share the same goal: to keep the mourning moving, to prevent it from turning into rage. There are records, however, of ceremonies that got out of hand. In 1984, in Fresno, a group improvised a ritual in the crypt of an abandoned mission. They used mixed symbols from different cultures, provoking what they called an emotional explosion. Witnesses described screams coming from the ground, glass shattering spontaneously, and the sudden loss of consciousness of 2 participants. Nothing was officially recorded, but audio recordings of that night leaked onto an esoteric forum years later. The main sound isn't human. It's not animal. It's a fragmented cry, as if multiple voices tried to merge into one but couldn't. In Boston, historian Richard Cole recorded in his diary an encounter with a woman who claimed to be a direct descendant of a colonial washerwoman. She said her grandmother performed a longing bath every March. It consisted of washing black cloths in boiling water while chanting the names of soldiers killed in undocumented battles. A skeptical Cole attended the ceremony, but what struck him was the water, which at the end of the ritual was a dark red, with no ink, blood, or any pigment involved. He was never able to explain it. Afterward, he began reporting dreams of a faceless woman standing atop Bunker Hill, shrouded in mist, saying simply, "One more to go." Art has also been nourished by these rituals. In Sacramento, choreographer Amelia Torres created the piece Steps of the Shadow, inspired by the nighttime walks of Las Llorantes. The show consists of 33 minutes of absolute silence, where the dancers simply walk in circles, passing each other at alternating speeds. At the end, one of them falls to her knees and begins to cry silently. The audience often leaves the performance in tears, not out of empathy but because of something inexplicable, as if something deep inside them had been touched. In Massachusetts, filmmaker Julius Baker released the short film House on Tremont, based on the secret rituals of the Ramos family. The production was shot entirely in natural light, and during filming, strange audio interference was reported. In one scene, the main character's crying was recorded live, but when played back, the sound sounded like it was coming from a well. The sound engineer assured them the microphone was clean. The film was shown in only 2 showings and then withdrawn from the circuit. One of the producers stated, on condition of anonymity, something in the film didn't want to be seen. These manifestations sparked the interest of a younger generation who began documenting the rituals on social media, but the results were often disturbing. On TikTok, a user known as Vizos Perdida posted a series of videos showing fragments of a nighttime ceremony in Santa Barbara. In one clip, the image flickers while a figure appears to appear in the background. The audio abruptly cuts off and is replaced by a deep sound, similar to subterranean thunder. The video was removed by the platform for potentially sensitive content. She never posted it again. In Boston, a group of college students attempted to recreate one of the Ramos rituals in a campus basement based on online descriptions. The result was a collective nervous breakdown. 3 of those involved simultaneously claimed to have seen a veiled woman standing at the basement entrance. None of them knew the original account. When interviewed separately, they described the figure with identical details. After the event, they all dropped out of their history programs and moved to another city. Psychologists and sociologists attempt to explain this phenomenon as mass hysteria, the effect of suggestion or induced fear. But even among the most skeptical, there is a growing recognition that something, perhaps not supernatural, but certainly profound, connects these experiences. A layer of the social unconscious, where historical traumas coalesce and express themselves symbolically through rituals, apparitions, art, and silence. Because what's at stake isn't just the woman who weeps, it's what she represents, the intersection between the bleeding past and the present that pretends not to see. She is the reflection of what we try to bury: unredressed injustices, unmourned deaths, uncomfortable truths. And rituals are, perhaps, the only language that can still reach her. They say that whoever hears her crying up close never sleeps peacefully again, not out of fear, but because they know too much. What about you? Have you ever felt like someone was crying next to you when no one was in the room? Have you ever dreamed of a veiled woman saying words you didn't understand but felt? Tell us in the comments. Share your story. This channel is more than a video series. It's a space to gather voices, memories, whispers lost to time. And if you've made it this far, you may already be hearing what many prefer to ignore. If you're not yet part of our journey, sign up now, because what follows goes deeper. The next step takes us to suppressed documents, torn diaries, and a theory that could change the way we understand not only the bereaved, but the act of remembering itself. In a forgotten room of the Western Regional Archives, located in a faded annex of the University of San Jose, lies a collection that should never have survived the 1974 purge. A box, unmarked, marked only with the penciled inscription, "Echoes of Faith and Blood," contains fragmented records that, at first glance, seem unconnected. Torn letters, unfinished maps, ecclesiastical minutes written in colonial Spanish, and excerpts from diaries deteriorated by time and moths. But when cross-referenced with similar documents held by the Boston Historical Library, the coincidence breaks down and the pattern reveals itself. The two coasts were somehow bearing witness to the same presence, documenting the same signs, trying to conceal the same figure. The clearest connection emerges through a name that appears in both sets of documents: Father Martín Cordero, a Franciscan friar who served at the Santa Clara de Asís mission between 1785 and 1792. His personal diary, presumed lost, resurfaces in this clandestine archive. In his final entries, Cordero speaks of a woman who walks between bells and dreams, who appears during storms and murmurs words in languages not even the natives recognize. He records the disappearance of 4 young indigenous people after a night when the woman was seen near the external altar. He claims he tried to stop her, but when he touched her, his arm froze. He describes the absolute cold that spread across the stone floor and ends the diary with the phrase, "She is the penance of those who deny the past." Cordero's name later reappears in correspondence between Revolutionary Army chaplains in Massachusetts. A document dated 1794 mentions a renegade Spaniard who had arrived on the New England coast seeking light and forgiveness. Military records show that a man with a Spanish accent introduced himself as a missionary brother and requested access to the Boston crypts to perform prayers of reconciliation. He was denied, but was still seen wandering the colonial cemeteries for weeks. A watchman of the time, Samuel Pritchard, notes in his notebook that the stranger spoke to the tombstones as if they answered, and said to the moon that the weeping had not yet been enough. But it is the diary of Eleonora Blake, a music teacher and daughter of an abolitionist jurist, that offers one of the most disturbing accounts. In her youth, Eleonora traveled west with her father as part of a delegation interested in expanding public schools in the newly annexed territories. There, she visited Mission San Buenaventura and recorded her experience. On a loose page, she wrote, "The chapel is beautiful, but the garden groans. There is no wind, but the leaves move. I heard someone calling to me in Latin, and I saw a woman far away, standing like a long dissonant note. No one else saw her. They said it was the heat, but I felt cold." Decades later, back in Boston, Eleonora spent her final years in a house near Mount Auburn Cemetery. Letters exchanged with her doctor reveal that she began having recurring episodes of sleepwalking, in which she repeated passages in archaic Spanish and sang unfamiliar melodies. One letter describes waking up one night screaming, pointing to the window and saying, "She's back, but now she knows me." This kind of convergence between events separated by generations caught the attention of cultural anthropologist Helena Viscardi, who spent 30 years tracking down documents forgotten by traditional historiography. In her research, Viscardi traces the presence of the same figure: woman, veil, weeping, silence, cold, in at least 11 states, connecting rituals, religious escapes, massacres, and urban reforms. According to her, the enlutada is not an invention or a spirit in the folkloric sense. It is a symbiotic representation, an interface between repressed grief and the attempt to narrate that grief through language, sound, art, liturgy, and space. Viscardi notes that the figure's trail coincides with waves of cultural suppression, the destruction of indigenous records and missions, the censorship of revolutionary pamphlets that criticized the patriots themselves, the silencing of women's voices in convents and religious schools. Whenever history attempted to suppress a narrative, it emerged. Whenever a truth threatened to be stifled, the cry was heard. The parallel between the legend and the structure of social trauma has gained traction in modern studies of collective memory. Psychologists at Columbia University conducted a survey of descendants of survivors of colonial violence and revolutionary repression. When presented with images of hooded figures, veils, and crypts, more than 68% reported immediate physical sensations: chills, nausea, chest pressure. The accounts described subsequent dreams of damp stone environments, the sounds of distant bells, and in many cases, a woman watching silently.